and gentlemen, this is David Mercatani with Matt Chat. Today, I am happy to be joined by the Executive Director of USA Wrestling, Rich Bender. Rich, thanks for taking some time to be with me today.
Hey, my pleasure, Dave.
How was your trip overseas with the Pan Ams?
Well, we didn't actually go over any seas, but we went down south to Brazil and had a great performance in Salvador with actually all three teams. And came away with 2 or 3 Pan Am team titles, and we're second with our women. So 17 medals overall. Pretty good week for Team USA.
Yeah, the results were impressive, and track wrestling covered all that stuff, so it was kind of cool to be able to watch that. I really want to get into, what all you do at USA Wrestling and everything else, but for the people that don't know, what is your background that led you to the position you're in now?
Well, I was a high school wrestler and exposed to the sport at a very young age. Had some cousins that were involved in the sport in rural southwestern Wisconsin, and I guess it's safe to say I drank the entire pitcher of Kool-Aid early on, and was inspired by the sport at a very young age. Participated in youth wrestling up through high school, and actually into college I decided to try to pursue a baseball, but went on to get a degree in athletic administration and was offered an internship with USA Wrestling in the summer of 1988 and never left. So been at USA Wrestling for I'll be 29 years here in July, and so I was an average high school wrestler probably at best, but someone that developed a big passion for the sport early on. I had a 7th grade science teacher that my middle part of my 7th grade year in school, my science teacher sent home a report card, and on the back wrote, "Wrestling, wrestling, wrestling. All Rich wants to do is talk about wrestling. Can you please inform him there's more to life than wrestling?" And I still have the report card today, and in fact, tease that same science teacher a lot when I go back to my hometown, Bosco, Wisconsin, about the fact that, there was more to life, but not a lot more to life. And certainly, so been inspired and just passionate about the sport as long as I can remember.
That's awesome. And I think there's a couple things that stuck out to me there. First of all, it shows, like, even within a place like USA Wrestling, like I started my financial services career as an intern and, ended up owning my own business. And the same thing, and you literally started at, either a very low paying or maybe even a volunteer internship to begin with, and have moved your way all the way up. And the other thing that we talk about a lot on these podcasts are how wrestling is such a great sport. And I know obviously everyone listening agrees with that, but that you don't have to have been, John Smith or Cael Sanderson to love the sport and to want to make it better and to give back. And, I'm sure you're probably downplaying how good of a wrestler you were, but it's cool that somebody who wasn't a world champion loved it so much that wanted to be involved at USA Wrestling at such a high level.
Well, I mean, that is a beauty of the sport. I mean, obviously, I think that we talk about this a lot with elite athletes and coaching. And the reality of it is, to be a successful wrestler, there's an element of selfishness that has to be incorporated into your training and just the way you live your life. To be an elite wrestler, you have to be selfish about a lot of things. And to be a great coach, you have to be incredibly selfless. And I think it's, so some struggle, I think, from making that transition, and some realize that maybe, on the coaching side or the giving side is, there's opportunities regardless of whether you've been, world Olympic champion. And not saying that there's countless examples of elite athletes who have went on to become incredible administrators and coaches in the sport. So that transition is, it's done a lot within our sport. But yeah, I started here as an intern. $5 a day was my pay, and pretty blessed to have been given the opportunities I have, and And certainly I think at the foundation of it all is just a huge love and passion and recognition for what the sport has done for me. So, that's I think a lot of the story there.
Yeah, for sure. What exactly are the responsibilities of the executive director of USA Wrestling?
Well, I mean, obviously, well, maybe not obviously. I mean, USA Wrestling is structured in such a way that, I report to a volunteer board of directors,
okay,
and led by a volunteer president who, a great example of an elite athlete that's transitioned into a great administrator and coach, and that's Bruce Baumgartner. And so Bruce is my immediate boss. That's who I report to every day, and person that manages me. And my responsibility is the management of the professional staff here at USA Wrestling, which, obviously, we take direction as a professional organization from, ultimately our board. But my responsibility is to direct the professional staff here at USA Wrestling and manage the day-to-day operations of USA Wrestling as the national governing body for our sport.
So you're helping to direct like the Gary Abbotts, Taylor Millers, Eric Sikoras, Richard Immels of the world, those folks?
Well, ultimately that's my responsibility, and I'm really blessed to work with a professional team here at USA Wrestling that doesn't need a lot of day-to-day direction. Obviously, we have we're blessed to have a team of self-starters here that don't show up to work every day at 8 o'clock at USA Wrestling expecting Rich Bender to tell them what to do.
Sure.
But I mean, I think certainly we work to get with all those people. I think our staff is 40-ish, counting interns now and then. So a lot of coaches and professional workers here at USA Wrestling that manage the different aspects of our business.
Yeah, and Gary Abbott's been friends with my mom and dad forever, and USA Wrestling has been awesome in helping us with the charitable stuff we've done with Randy Couture's charity and the Missouri Border Brawl and all that stuff. And, I met Taylor when, through being at Oklahoma State. So, I mean, you got a great group of people down there, or up there, I guess, for sure. So
certainly the best part of my job is to work with people like Gary Abbott. And, certainly it's inspiring every day to realize the number of folks that contribute to our sport that don't do it for a paycheck. And obviously the professional staff at USA Wrestling are paid, but there's a huge passion and motivation around the fact that there's this huge love to shove our sport forward and desire to shove our sport and the organization forward. So, yeah, I think that the biggest asset at USA Wrestling is the professional staff and the people that work every day on behalf of our members and the sport.
Yeah, they're awesome. And when I was talking to Gary about some stuff here a couple of weeks ago on a contest we'd run, he had mentioned something about USA Wrestling having 4 core business objectives. And I made a note of that because I wanted to, I was going to try to get you on. What are those objectives and how do you guys go about trying to achieve those?
So what I say to our staff all the time, that if you're doing something that doesn't contribute to one of these 4 core business objectives, stop doing it. And at the end of the day, in our 4 core business objectives are to 1, grow the base, 2, build the brand, 3, sustain competitive excellence with our teams, and then the 4th and final is the network the wrestling community online. And I think everything that we do at USA Wrestling contributes to one of those 4 core principles. And I think it's obviously there's some element of being a bit nebulous in terms of, how do you measure, success or failure around building the brand. Obviously growing the base, we can look to our USA Wrestling membership every year and judge our performance and, the traffic and connectivity that our membership has via the internet or online is easy to measure. In fact, we have some metrics that shows us how we're doing with that weekly. So, and then the excellence with our teams. I mean, last year USA Wrestling won more combined medals from our age group world world level teams than we have since 1972. So,
Wow.
Had a great year last year, and really are excited about the future competitively for USA Wrestling in our country.
And that's with less weight classes, especially. It used to be 10 weight classes. So, I mean, that's.
Yeah. And in all fairness, less weight classes, but, obviously women were added to it. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at the Olympic Games and, look at our medal performance there. And we, along with others, right, are disappointed with that number. But, obviously looking at, a couple of those gold medals and what they meant historically, and Cael Sanderson was the youngest American ever to win a gold medal in wrestling, and Helen Morales becoming the first woman ever to win a gold medal for Team USA are really monumental accomplishments. And I think it's really exciting to think about the future and where we stand competitively in the sport is really cool.
Yeah, and I was going to ask a different question, but I'm going to ask this next. You talk about people like Snyder and Morales, and I know a lot of people that know you. I mean, my dad's your friend. He's gone fishing with you and stuff like that, and they talk to me about how emotional some of those experiences are for you, because you get to know these guys and gals, obviously, at a pretty unique level, and I think anybody who's ever wrestled or dealt with wrestling knows that when someone wins, that person doesn't win by him or herself. That a lot of people have sunk time and effort and money and everything else into them. So, to watch those medal performances along with Jaden, like, how emotional was some of that for you?
Well, it's incredibly emotional. And I think it's, for me, it's emotional because, and obviously incredibly connected or attached to the individual. But I think for me that, the emotion really comes from, kind of looking at it globally in terms of, what's gone into that performance, whether that might be, someone that's working in the mailroom, a volunteer that's running a table, a coach that, gave of his Saturday to give, athletes the opportunity to move forward. And I think when you start to think about how the sport has invested in these athletes, and obviously that's the highest stage in our the grandest stage in our sport is the Olympic Games. And I think ultimately that's one of the things that saved us in 2013 is there's little question about what the most important wrestling event in the world is. It's the Olympic Games, and that can't be said about other sports like soccer or basketball, right? I mean, it's clearly every athlete that's ever dreamt about winning anything is always, visualize themselves as standing at the top of the podium at the Olympic Games. And I think when you start to think about and Dave Schultz said this, that, if he broke his medal up and gave a little piece to everybody that had an impact on his life and his success, he had to break it into thousands of pieces because so many people, and, I think it's the thing that's emotional about it is that, not jokingly, right? It's that mom or that uncle or that grandpa that volunteered their time on a Saturday afternoon to run a clock that gave, Cael Snyder the opportunity to participate and be just absolutely consumed by a sport that, I have no doubt that anybody that's ever been involved in the sport of wrestling is better for it, period, regardless of any situation you could tell me. And I think that's what's pretty cool about wrestling and why it's so, it's easy to get emotional about it. And I've had the pleasure to serve for 6 years as the chair of the National Governing Body Council for the U.S. Olympic Committee, so around 47 other executive directors. And I think, that experience has made me realize how unique wrestling really is. And I think, not that, there isn't this huge infrastructure behind swimmers and other athletes, but, I think at the end of the day, when you think about, everything, the purest pursuit in all sport, in my opinion, is American wrestler trying to win a medal for his country. Because they're not motivated by fame or fortune. They're motivated by just that innate desire to be the best. And I think that kind of goes back to the people that are contributing. It's just, anyone that's ever wrestled feels some sense of responsibility to give back, knowing what the sport's done for them. And I think I get emotional just talking about it. Yeah. You see someone like, Kyle or Helen or, Jaden to achieve success at the highest level and knowing that, hey, it's not only taking an incredible investment by the individual, but if you think about the investment that others have made, it's just really awe-inspiring.
It is, and I know Jaden a little bit. I actually recruited his older brother, and I'm friends with his family, especially his mom, and all three of the medalists were really trailblazers in some way. Obviously, Helen being our first female gold medalist, Snyder being the youngest, and obviously by that being in college, and him and Jaden both, coming back to college and turning down that immediate money and that endorsement money. It really shows you how much those two, and obviously Helen the same way, how much they just love wrestling, and that they're not, like you said, they're not doing it for the money, and that being an Olympic gold medalist, you're right. I mean, I wrestled, and that you don't dream about, I want to win, the World Cup like in soccer or the NBA title. I mean, you're right. The Olympic medal is the pinnacle for wrestling. So it has to just be, and you've been to so many of these events. I would be a blubbering mess if I went to all those, So.
Well, I am sometimes, but it's I think I told you the story last week about when Adam Wheeler won the medal in '08. It was the first and only Greco medal we got in '08, and obviously coming off such an incredible high the year before, where we were the world team champions, and obviously to think that we'd only win one medal in a year later in '07 was really disheartening. But to just stand there with John Barth and just weep, just with obviously it wasn't the fact that that we won a bronze medal in Greco-Roman wrestling, but it was just what it meant, the fact that we were able to to just achieve some success after the investment that so many people made, and just was relief. And obviously there wasn't a lot of satisfaction. Hey, when we look back and say, hey, we won one bronze medal in Greco-Roman wrestling, but if you know the backstory and everything, the fact of where Adam came from, he was supposed to be on our team, right. And the fact that it came down to the last day and the last opportunity, the guy got it done for us. It's pretty emotional.
Well, and I saw one of those Facebook posts about him, like he started out like 0-11 or something his first year of wrestling, and something like that, where he was terrible and just pushed through. Yeah. So, yeah, that's amazing. So. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and, I know you and I spoke, I was lucky enough to have, Mr. Art Martori on a couple of weeks ago, and the guy sees things from such a global level, and I know firsthand what you think of him. What all was your role and USA Wrestling's role in saving Olympic wrestling?
Well, it's, and certainly if there's anything that someone can point to as an accomplishment being a team effort, and then I think in this case it was a global effort. That was the challenge in 2013, and certainly I think there are many that would like to take complete credit for it, and no one can. It was a certain. Certainly it was. The success was contributed to a lot of different factors, and one factor, which I think is the most important factor, was we were right? We weren't trying to sell something to somebody that wasn't right. That was the fact that wrestling should be on the Olympic program. And I think, there was an element of this where, we had a decision to make early on. Were we going to take the approach of we're going to fight, we're going to, make somebody pay for this suggestion or recommendation, we're going to sue somebody, we're going to stand up and be wrestlers and punch somebody in the face and make them pay for this ridiculous decision. And instead, and then this is, I think, what I'm most proud of in terms of, how, USA Wrestling and others, kind of led that charge, because that was the sentiment coming from around the world and around our country, that this is unbelievable. These guys are idiots. That they should not have made this decision, and we need to fight. We need to sue somebody. We need to beat somebody up. And the reality of it is we took the approach early on, and that was, we are now going to use this as an opportunity to make ourselves better, right? We know that, we're dealing with a lot of nobility and aristocracy, and right, they don't react well to being challenged. And, and we also knew early on that this was an opportunity for us to get better. We weren't a very good sport. In fact, I would never suggest that we deserve to be not on the Olympic program. But I'm telling you, there were a lot of problems in the sport of wrestling. Not that there still aren't some that we need to be paying attention of, but we were being led by an international federation that was a dictatorship, right? Making bad decisions. I mean, if you remember, we actually were determining who Olympic champions were by ball poll.
Yeah, it was ridiculous, right?
And really, I mean, a governance structure that was archaic and ultimately put us in the position to start with, because there was no relationship with the IOC. There was, a lot of rules that were, really subjective, and we weren't doing justice to the sport and our athletes. And I think so. The biggest decision early on, outside of, was that we were right, was the fact that we took that approach. That okay, let's look at this let's embrace this as an opportunity for us to improve our sport. And the fact is, it's God's sport. That helped too, right? I mean,
yeah. That's right.
And so we that was the approach we took early on. And I think, obviously a lot of recognition, rightfully so, goes to CPOW and the group of men and women that, met every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. and talked about, what we should be doing to ensure that we remain rightfully so on the program. But, I think it's, safe to say that USA Wrestling, was a world leader in that fight. And, that wasn't Rich Bender. That was a lot of people. That was, hundreds of people, really, when you start to think about it, that were, investing time, energy, and resources and to, whatever we could do to raise the relevancy of wrestling to ensure that the IOC didn't make a mistake and take us off the program.
Yeah. And you're, obviously you're deflecting, and you had to play a huge role in that. Was it, for people that, I think when I spoke to Art, I just said, a lot of us probably bought a T-shirt and signed a petition and maybe even wrote a big or a little check. But how Art Martori said he never really felt like wrestling was going to get dropped. Did you have that same level of confidence, or was it a lot scarier from your point of view?
Well, I think at night when you put your head on the pillow during this fight, right, there was part of me, and I said earlier, it's God's sport, and there was part of me thinking there's no pathway for them to realistically take wrestling off the program. But I would just quickly go to the fact, but how did we get to this point, right? The executive committee of the IOC thought that made sense. So, we just can't, take a passive role in this and say, hey, they'll figure it out. And so, I think it was, it was scary. I thought that when you were thinking at it logically to say this makes no sense, and anybody you talk to would say the same thing, that this is ridiculous. But yet you go back to the fact that we're in this to start with, and nothing, in my opinion, was outside of the realm of possible when it comes to a group, because, and I think it's safe to say, and probably the IOC would even say this today. There's an element of dysfunction that exists in that group. And, so, never did I think we ever were absolutely for sure until I heard, Jacques Rogue mention wrestling on that day in Buenos Aires, that wrestling was on, was remaining on the program. So, I think it was, I think there were times where we thought things were going really well and felt confident. And remember, we immediately embarked on an incredibly, elaborate campaign to lobby, 100 plus free agents or ILC members to ensure that, they were, they knew the gravity of the sport. And I think, everything helped, whether that was, how we raised the relevancy within wrestling in the United States, or, the interaction we had with the ILC. And I think, one of the byproducts of that fight was the fact that we now have the president of the International Federation is a full IOC member, which is something we hadn't enjoyed in the past. And I think, had we had someone in that role in 2013, we probably wouldn't have got to that point. But I'm I'm not bashful about saying that I think the 2013 challenge to wrestling is the best thing that's ever happened to our sport.
Certainly the rules have changed. I think it's almost like any relationship, right? When the threat of losing it, it makes you appreciate it more, whether it's a friend or a spouse or anything, my brother had literally almost died like 15 years ago. And, the stuff you take for granted, you just don't anymore. So
yeah,
it completely changed.
Well, I'll tell you, if you think for a second that I didn't take a lot of take it personally, I mean, in terms of understanding my role and responsibility at USA Wrestling, that, believe me, I mean, there was incredible motivation. That old saying, "Not on my watch," certainly was motivation for me. But also realize that there's no way that one individual could do this, and certainly I, in no way, am taking any credit for the success. But it's really inspiring to think back about the people, the Bill Shears, the Jim Shears, the Stan Desicks, and I mean John Barth, Mike Norton. I mean, I shouldn't even start naming names, but Art Martori's. I mean, those people, that Andy Barth, that just set it all on the table and said, okay, what do we got to do and how are we going to do it? And it was, and that was the attitude that tens of thousands of people had within wrestling, certainly in the United States and around the world, right? I mean, it's kind of legendary how the sport rallied itself, and the fact that we had 1 million Japanese people sign a petition, and obviously the things that the Iranians and the United States and the Russians all got together and competed, in a really crazy environment in New York, in a time where the sport really needed us to show unity. And so I mean, wrestling for sure should never be considered to come off the Olympic Games program ever under any circumstance. I mean, it is the greatest sport known to man, and it's foundational to the ideals and of the Olympic movement. I mean, Pierre de Coubertin said many times, right, that he identified the Olympic Games as the betterment of mankind through sport. And if you think about what wrestling has been able to do, I don't know how many sitting presidents have tried to get Russia and Iran and the United States around the table. They haven't been able to do it yet.
Wrestling did it like that.
Wrestling does it consistently. And so, it really was, I mean, it wasn't so much fun going through it at the time, but thinking back, it really is a true testament to the strength of wrestling, the fact that 2013 fight went the way it did.
Well, Art Martori and I joked that the first two sports in the Olympics were wrestling and running, and that after he would have got done whooping my ass in wrestling, that I would have had to go run. So, it's obviously as core to the sports as you can get. So, yeah. He told me a great story about him and Tricia Saunders and a couple other people putting together the women's weight classes, like literally sitting in the bleachers at a tournament and listening to somebody like Tricia, who obviously was an unbelievable competitor and winner, but also her knowledge of like these would be the right weight classes for women. So what was USA Wrestling's role in getting women's wrestling added to the world and Olympic platforms?
Well, I mean, we realized early on that for women's wrestling to have success, the probably the most important thing that needed to happen was the Olympic designation to really put the stamp of legitimacy on a sport that we knew was legitimate, right, within our own wrestling circles. And I think not dissimilar to the fight in 2013. I mean, USA Wrestling, early on knew that we were dealing with a international federation that was somewhat dysfunctional, and that had a really difficult time organizing things. And Gary Abbott and I and many others sat down, actually wrote the proposal for UWW, or at the time FILA, to submit to the IOC to for women to be added to the program. It ultimately was successful in 2004. But USA Wrestling took an absolute leadership role in that designation, just providing support and actually writing the documents that the IF then ultimately submitted. And, but people, obviously Trish Saunders was, monstrous in that process of helping, the USA Wrestling organize, the thoughts around why and how. And obviously there were others that were already participating in the sport, like Japan and Canada, that were, obviously influential in us, ultimately making the proposal to the IOC. But, if you remember back in 2004, it wasn't all that popular within the traditional wrestling community.
That's right.
Here,
yeah.
Even in the United States. And I think it's, a true testament to, pioneers like Trish Saunders and Art Martori and those that, saw the value. And I think Kerry Steiner summed it up really well. And when I heard him do an interview one time about when we hired him at USA Wrestling. And, he said at the end of the day, when he started to think about it, he clearly understood the value that the sport, has for boys and men that have participated.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, why wouldn't that be the same for women? and the reality of it does, right? And, so I think it's, another example of the sport really rallying together. And I think, today the strategy is pretty simple in terms of the further development of women's wrestling, right? We were able to be fortunate enough to secure the Olympic designation, now working hard, and August is the deadline for us to submit the emerging sport request to the NC2A for,
nice.
women's wrestling to be recognized as an NCAA sport. And then ultimately our strategy is to continue to build the number of state high school activity associations that recognize women's wrestling as a standalone sport. And I think, it's part of a process. And I think it's, the reality of it is that the foundation of all this is a sport that has stood the test of time, and the fact that it is a good sport, right? It's an awesome sport. Maybe the best. I'm convinced that it's the best sport. Now, yeah, can it be better publicized and better promoted? Sure, we all need to continue to work hard to try to raise our relevancy. But at the end of the day, there's no sport that has a better positive impact on human lives than wrestling. And we can go through the hundreds of different attributes that are developed by participation in the sport, but it is without question in my mind the best sport when it comes to just impacting lives positively than any other sport.
Yeah, amen to that. So, I called my dad and told him I was going to get to interview you, and he told me you're just about the best storyteller he knows. So I wanted to carve some time out to just kind of play name game or word association with you, and just you tell me about your thoughts and impressions of some people, if that's okay. So,
yeah.
The first one he told me, and I guess you all went fishing together, but you and John Smith actually share the same birthday, like literally the same day, year, everything. Is that correct?
That's correct. 8/9/65.
Okay. Tell me about your impressions of John.
Well, obviously when I started in 1988, John was already a very accomplished wrestler. And, I think, maybe because we shared a birthday, we started to develop a relationship more quickly than, maybe just, an organic get to know somebody type relationship. But, I think John is, I consider him to be one of my best friends and somebody that I, not unlike Art Martori, do bounce a lot of professional things off of in terms of, hiring or decisions for the organization. And John is, I think, comes across or likes to have develop, and he's worked to develop this persona of this, okie, aw shucks kind of guy that kind of stumbled into a wrestling room and, had some success. And John Smith is one of the most intelligent people I know, and somebody that, I think doesn't, and on purpose, right? He doesn't always come across as someone that's thinking on a different level. But John, I think, it comes across to me as, one of the most intelligent people, certainly when it comes to the sport of wrestling that I've ever been around.
Yeah. Tell me, you helped me a lot with the interview with Art Martori, so tell me about him.
So Art, like John, I mean, I think we all have a kind of a core group of people that we consider mentors and people that we just, Art's been a father figure for me for as long as I can remember at USA Wrestling. Somebody that's, obviously been wildly successful in life, and someone that's never, ever forgotten about the impact that wrestling's had on his personal life. And I think Art is as genuine and a giving person as I've ever met, somebody that will not filter his opinion when he gives it to you, and somebody that, you want in your foxhole. If, and obviously 2013, Art was a guy that, didn't want the limelight, yet he was that call that you knew that if you ever needed something, he was there. And, Art Martori is, and I said this in an interview before, that I think Art Martori might very well be the most consequential figure in the history of wrestling in the United States. I mean, I think there's few elite wrestlers, whether they wrestle for the Sun-Kissed Kids or not, or, the hundreds and thousands of kids that have been impacted by wrestling that don't draw, that Art Martori's fingerprints aren't somewhere on that lens. So, I mean, I can't say enough good things about Art, and I think, he's just been somebody that's been incredibly influential on me personally.
Yeah, he's the godfather, and he also said that anytime you guys want to go snowmobiling or anything with an engine, that he's ready for round two. So,
yeah, and you make sure you wear your helmet.
I heard about that, and I mean, he's a competitor. I said, so if we did this, he goes, yeah, it was just like that. We're going to go hard. So,
yeah.
Tell me about your impressions or your interactions with Cael Sanderson.
So obviously Cael, Cael, most of my experience with Cael revolves around him competing, and certainly now as he, has become arguably, if not one of the top college coaches maybe ever, and but Cael has just always been that kind of consummate professional, and someone that, Cael, you never saw, get really high or really low. And if you ever look back at Cael and, winning world NCAA championships or heck, the Olympic Games, what did he do? Like snapped his fingers. That was his emotion. And I think, my impression of Cael is that, he's unlocked something that, many have tried, but few have been able to succeed at. And that is really making, the experience for his wrestlers be, it's not, people will look at the sport of wrestling and say, hey, this is a hard sport, right? You have to make sacrifices and put in a body of work that few others would seem to be enjoyable or fun.
Right.
And I think Cael's been able to unlock that. And I think, if you talk to any of the guys that have wrestled for Cael, and, they all are pretty consistent in what they say. Hey, we have fun. We have fun at Penn State. And I think, obviously winning's fun, right? But,
yeah.
I think there's more to it than that. And I think Cael's kind of steady demeanor and his, honest assessment and, builds, really, I think, true relationships, cares about his kids. Not that, there are the coaches that certainly do that too, but I think Cael's doing that on a little bit different level. And the fact that, he's somebody that I said earlier where, it's not easy to transition from elite athlete to elite coach.
Right.
Where, obviously John's one that's done that too, and a number of other people. But, you have to be incredibly successful to win at the level that those guys did. And then certainly to win at the level they are as a coach, you have to be incredibly selfless. And, Cael's figured that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's one of the, for sure. But, I think the best is still yet to come out of Cael Sanderson as a coach. And I think, we're getting a taste of what the future is going to look like from him.
Most definitely. So another guy that was always calm 100% of the time. Tell me about Dan Gable.
Well, so I know, and I call Dan Gable coach, even though he never coached me, and but I know Dan as that coach, and somebody that I don't think there's anybody on earth that has a bigger passion to promote our sport than Dan Gable. And I think, obviously Dan's, competitive success and coaching success is legendary, right? I mean, it's top of just about every category in the record books. What Dan brings to the table for sport is I mean, he's been able to transition even to another level where he, from a to successful ambassador. And I think, Dan is the true ambassador for wrestling. I think, it's interesting that there's, not been a lot of people in the sport of wrestling that have transcended our sport, where you can go into a growth. And, Rulon Gardner's name for a while was, one of those people. Gable, certainly in the generation, he's stayed relevant in the sport. He works every day, every single day. Dan Gable wakes up and works to promote wrestling. And that's where, why I have so much respect for the guy. Not only is he one of the all-time greats competitively and as a coach, but, man, the guy he just never stops. I mean, he's constantly looking for ways to promote wrestling. And I think, that's inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the guys you mentioned earlier, just in a different context, but to me, I'm kind of a wrestling nerd and look up a lot of stuff and know a lot of history. Maybe the most underrated USA wrestler of all time. Tell me about Bruce Baumgartner.
Well, 13-time World Olympic champ, and the guy that hired me as executive director of USA Wrestling. You won't hear me ever say anything negative about the guy. and I think not only, obviously, Bruce is one of the guys that when you write down on a piece of paper who are the people impact and one some amount of credit, that's Bruce, right? I mean, Bruce understood, his ability and obviously his success competitively is unmatched, right? 13 times he won a medal for our country at the World Olympic Games and 4 times, in the Olympics. And I mean, that's just, I don't see us seeing athletes like that come. Maybe, I hope that maybe Cael or cuff that guy, but Bruce is just I would categorize him as that giver, right? I mean, life is made up of givers and takers,
right?
And Bruce Baumgartner is a true giver and somebody that works a full-time job as a athletic director at Edinburgh University, yet gives me every second of every day that I need to, whatever that might be, to help and just be a part of USA Wrestling, an inspirational. But I think in history from around the world, I think he lives his life right. He runs his businesses right, and he's a true giver. And I can't say enough good things about Big Bruce.
For sure. Rich, I don't know if you moved at all, but in the last minute or two, we've had a little bit of cutout. So if there's a better spot, just because I want everybody to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just standing by a back door to make sure.
Okay.
Coverage here, but.
Okay. So tell me about Andy Barth, another one of the givers in our sport.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a funny story about Andy. And Andy, Andy was recognized in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame early on his involvement, in the sport, and he was inducted as an outstanding American in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Early in his kind of involvement with USA Wrestling, and I remember it like it was yesterday. His speech, in his induction speech, obviously he talked about how the sport had helped him become, one of the most successful businessmen in the United States. And, had, just incredible success from that perspective. But in his induction speech, he said, "I don't think that I've earned this honor, but I plan to." And,
that's great. Yeah.
And he's done, he's lived up to his word. That guy is, unbelievable when it comes to his just passion to help people. There's I like to think that there's givers, takers, and there's helpers, and people that really have invested themselves in helping others be successful. And Jimmy Jordan said in his induction speech to the Hall of Fame that what makes America great is the unbelievable commitment by mothers and fathers of American kids to make their lives better than life. I think Andy Grady really wakes up every day and thinks about how he can make someone's life better. And, he is, someone that, had served as our team leader this past quad and, was just an inspirational leader for that team, and someone that continues to give, through the Titan Mercury Wrestling Club and a number of different ways. And Andy's just, he's a rock star within the sport of wrestling for sure.
Yeah, and I know, obviously Titan Mercury and Sunkist compete, but Art Martori has tremendous amount of respect for Andy as well, obviously. So
yeah, for sure.
Tell me about the Brands brothers.
So Tom and Terry Brands, and it's I remember in 93, we won the World Championships for the first time as a team in Toronto, and that was Tom and Terry's first year on the team. And if you remember, they both won a World Championships without a turn, and just won, the World Championships on true just grit and toughness. Obviously, technically they're really solid, but it was, their first kind of splash on the team. And I think in all honesty, I know Terry a little bit better than Tom, just simply because Terry worked here with us. And obviously they are people and athletes and coaches that are inspired by Gable and certainly have developed their own kind of persona. And just grit, toughness. And I think the thing that's kind of misunderstood a lot about Tom and Terry is their technical ability as a coach. And I think, everyone kind of talks about, the Iowa style is just, beat people down and that's how you win. But, you look at some of the athletes that these guys have developed and themselves, specifically, competitively, technically, they've been superior. And I think, they are just, they're tough guys, right? They're tough, God-fearing guys that don't have a big filter, right? But yet
Correct, yeah.
have a big passion for wrestling. And they, like every single person that we've talked about, has a really clear, their clarity is unbelievable with them in terms of the impact wrestling has on people and themselves, right? And I think every single person we've talked about has a very clear understanding of how wrestling has impacted them positively, and the commitment to do everything in their power to have that impact as many people as they can. And I think, Tom and Terry live that every day. They are incredibly passionate about wrestling. They share some of Coach Gable's passion about promoting the sport, and obviously incredibly driven, competitive guys. But they're another group of guys that you want in your foxhole. And I have a ton of respect for those men and what they're doing at the University of Iowa and what they've done for our sport.
Yeah, I've had a chance to have Terry on twice on Matt Chat, and he's a very interesting, unfiltered would be a very accurate description, but just really passionate and, really not reserved. It's, he's one of the few guys he's told me, ask me anything. I got nothing to hide. And, super interesting guys. So,
yeah. And I if you get a chance to watch, Terry, you probably have that. The Flow did the piece on Terry. And I remember that, Olympic trials in 96 and in Seattle. And I was there when, Terry, had, an incredibly heartbreaking loss to Kendall Cross and crawled off the mat. And I ran in the back with Tom, and it was obviously a difficult time. And the documentary does a good job of, Terry went on to do some great things after that. And it's just another chapter in the sport of wrestling. It's pretty cool to think about.
Yeah, and that was one of the next guys. So tell me about Kendall.
So Kendall made two teams, and he made the 96 team, or he made the 92 team, right? 92 team, and somewhat of an upset. If I remember right, I think he beat Brad Penrith and made the team in 92, and then didn't have a lot of success at the games, but in 96. Was as dominant a wrestler as we had on our team, right? He rolled through the Olympic Games and, was somewhat of a darling in Atlanta and rightfully so, right? A really exciting wrestler, someone that's incredibly, resourceful. I think creative is probably a better word for Kendall. And, obviously, I heard John Smith say one time that when he was starting to develop his little single and technique, he felt like he was just he'd go in the room at Oklahoma State and felt like he was like a mad scientist. Like he was working on different angles and
Sure.
just kind of perfecting the, some of his, it wasn't just his little single, but, other techniques that were really kind of revolutionized the sport. And I put Kendall kind of in that category. I mean, Kendall, his high gut wrench and his approach to wrestling was different, created new techniques and styles within the sport. And, just somebody that's, I think then when Kendall was wrestling at the Olympic Games in '96, as exciting a wrestler as I've ever been around in terms of, fun to watch and creative and, incredibly gifted wrestler. And I think, starting, now with his new job out east at the Regional Training Center, I think he'll start to be, one of the more respected coaches out there. So Kendall has obviously had a big footprint in the sport, and I think it's going to get bigger.
Yeah, I'm friends with Coleman Scott when he was, getting ready to try to make the team, and Kendall just said, Kendall made a big point to him that, you just got to make those Olympic teams, and kind of gave, I think, Coleman a lot of extra confidence in that path. And to me, Kendall Cross, when I watched him wrestle, I don't know if this is the right word, but he almost wrestles with charisma. He looks like he's having so much fun, and he's just as good as a lot of guys are. His body movements, he can just do certain things that a lot of people can't do.
Yeah. I think he does a lot of things that wrestlers think about doing, but aren't able to do.
Yeah.
And, I think that's how he wrestled. And certainly, like I said, he's an incredibly creative guy and somebody that's been a great ambassador for wrestling.
Yeah. Tell me about your experiences with Jordan Burroughs.
So Jordan, obviously, my experience with Jordan is, has been since, really he started wrestling with Team USA. And, Jordan was a guy that, obviously had success in college and then, jumped into the international scene, right away. And, I think the thing that impresses me most about that just as a great wrestler, but as a father, a husband, and he's the whole package. Jordan Burroughs is obviously a very calculated individual, somebody that thinks about, what the impact are of his actions. And, obviously is, to be a wrestler that's achieving success at the level he is, incredibly focused on, what he needs to do to get himself better. But the thing that's, I think, unique about Jordan Burroughs is the clarity by which he looks at, his overall persona and how he conducts himself and carries himself and understands his responsibility. It's one thing to be a great wrestler and just, I'm focused on, winning the Worlds and the Olympic Games and, just that's my job. And I think Jordan takes it a step further where he clearly understands what he needs to do to win, but he also clearly understands his role and responsibility as an ambassador and somebody that, inspires kind of the next generation. And, obviously he's the real deal. Jordan Burroughs is not, what you see is Jordan Burroughs. He lives his life right. He is a great parent. He's a great husband, obviously an incredible competitor and somebody that's been, in recent times, he's the leader of Team USA and somebody that's, not been afraid to get out there in social media and talk about wrestling and what he thinks is important in terms of faith, etc. I think he's the full package, and he's somebody that I know for sure when Jordan Burroughs is done competing, and I'm hoping that's not for a long time, but
right.
he's going to be, that he's going to be a great coach if that's the direction he decides to pursue, and I know for sure he can always be a great ambassador for wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, one of the things I wanted to end up with you was just, we talked about it, Andy Hamilton and I, about people that are wrestling fans, and I love the NCAAs, and I love the NCAAs when they're in St. Louis. But when going to the U.S. Open this year and with the World Team Trials coming up, can you maybe, I don't even know if I can do it justice, just how many studs are in one place and how much more accessible they are and how much, there's every single person there, was a superstar at the collegiate level. And, I just had Mark Manning on last week and we're talking about the World Team Trials being in Lincoln. from a perspective of a guy like you that's been to so many of these, what could you maybe do to kind of help, frankly, drive attendance up and even encourage people to go to something like that?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that we struggle with the U.S. Open in particular is that, it's usually easy for us to classify events, right? Classify them as either spectator events or participatory events. We don't have enough spectator events, but, the U.S. Open is an event that has a participatory element to it. We had 33 different events going on in Las Vegas this year. And, obviously it's our Open Championship. So it's that kind of foundation, take all comers kind of attitude for, the event. So we try to promote it to as many people as we possibly can to participate, and then try to, as the event matures and goes on, we try to turn it into a spectator event. And sometimes we fail miserably with that. And I think, this year it's difficult to do. And I think, we'll get better next year at a better presentation for the finals. But to your point, right? So who do you put on the platform, Jordan Burroughs or Helen Burroughs? And, at the end of the day, we got to get better at figuring out how we can, do respect and give promotional opportunities to all. But I'm telling you, to be an elite wrestler in the sport of wrestling, freestyle and Greco, it's different. This isn't to make light at all of college wrestling, because obviously that's the pipeline. But ultimately, it's a different ball game when you go from the NCAA Division I to international wrestling. It's a different level. And yeah, it's not uncommon for us to, at a tournament like the U.S. Open have, 10, 12 NCAA Division I champs in one weight class. And, the good thing for our country is, that speaks to a little bit of depth, right. but it also, there's a challenge, right? It's a different style of wrestling, and, I'd be lying. But I'm a huge fan of folk style wrestling. I obviously, came up through that system, and, it's the foundation for wrestling in our country for sure. But there's transition that needs to take place. Great example is, right, Cael was the greatest collegiate wrestler of all time and didn't jump right into a world championship, right? It took him a while to transition. And I think, the cool thing about the U.S. Open and these big open freestyle events is that, right, you can go there and, it's a participatory event, so it tends to be easier to get down close and, kind of that touch and feel, but, at the end of the day, you can sit back and in hopefully one seat and watch, a semifinal, final round where it's kind of produced in a kind of a spectator friendly, point. I'm not sure if I answered your question,
no,
but
you did.
It's a struggle. And I think it's something that, we've worked with a number of different groups of trying to kind of reimagine some things. And I think, we changed some of our formats to try to, build a kind of a spectator following. But the thing that's a challenge for international wrestling is that, we don't have a traditional season, right? We don't have a season and a conference championship and a playoff and a
build up
in a build up. And so, it's always been a struggle for us, and certainly something that we're always open to ideas and ways to get better. And, because we for sure haven't, necessarily unlocked the code to how do you balance all that.
No, you guys are doing a great job, and obviously everybody in the world can do better in anything. But I guess my point is, just for people that are listening, is if you can go to Lincoln, go to Lincoln. The U.S. Open was fantastic, and now the World Team Trials are just the creme de la creme of that group. So,
well, I think the World Team Trials is one of the most under kind of developed and appreciated wrestling events in the world. And in the world. I think, obviously, everybody points to, Jaden Cox, David Taylor, Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Bake, and, but you think about that times about 50, right? Because, right, it's going to be a little bit unique this year in Lincoln because it's all freestyle. And, obviously, I'd be lying if I didn't say that, freestyle, right now is probably the most relevant style from a spectator standpoint in terms of where most of the recognized people are. And I'm certainly not saying that our women's freestyle and men's Greco programs aren't important and doing well too. But, I think it's a unique example of where this sport will be kind of standalone. And so, you're going to be able to go in and sit down and from the very first match, there's not a throwaway that you don't want to watch. And I think,
that's exactly right.
My hair in the back of my neck is standing up right now just thinking about those, early round matches with guys that, two-time NCAA champs. And, it speaks to the depth of the American program, right? When you got a guy that's, Chris Perry, who's, not been in the conversation with Jordan Burroughs and Kyle Beek and those guys. So, it's going to be incredibly exciting. I think it speaks well to what the future looks like. Not to mention, Cael's bringing a pile of guys in there that, are going to ruffle some feathers with the establishment. And I think, it's going to be exciting to see. And I think certainly, if you're a wrestling fan, you don't want to miss it because it's going to be a unique experience from the first whistle.
Yeah.
And one day, it's not, if you want to get there early, it's obviously we have some young stars that are going to be wrestling to make the U.S. junior team.
Right.
Guys like Mark Hall, which,
Zahid
Mr. Belinsky from Arizona State. And these guys are going to be wrestling the day before. And, but man, that Saturday is going to be as intensive a Saturday of wrestling as I think, we've seen maybe ever.
It's going to be amazing. And, USA Wrestling doesn't pay me to talk about this, but I really think people should try to get there if they can. I think it's just an amazing thing. And, it's, if you're a wrestling person and you kind of need to get your fix in June, that's the place to go. So, Rich, I appreciate it.
One thing I'd add to that, and I think, it's, we all talk about, the Olympic program and staying on the Olympic program. And, the best way for us to do that is to raise our relevancy. And I think, just by buying a ticket and going and watching not only is it incredibly enjoyable selfishly, but, it's also a great way to give back to the sport and, help us, drive things forward. So, it's not only is it going to be really enjoyable, I think it also is impactful in terms of, this, good numbers there and good attendance there to watch.
And people can either buy tickets there or just go to themat.com and just go to the events and follow it from there. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, you've given me an hour, which I truly appreciate. I appreciate all the friendship and support you've given to myself and my mom and dad over the years. And just want to thank you for taking the time to do this interview today.
Well, it's certainly been my pleasure. And I talked earlier about givers and takers, and certainly this sport has given me way more than I've given it. And I think it's certainly a pleasure and a blessing to be able to be involved with the sport and the individuals like yourself and your mom and dad that they're just really the backbone of our sport. And I think it's, so it's been a much more of a pleasure for me and just an honor to chat with you today.
Well, thank you so much. And I will definitely find you in Lincoln and we can catch up. Story time with Rich is one of the best things you can get to, folks. So if you can grab him for a minute and have him tell stories, it'll make your day. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was another episode of Mat Chat. I'm David Maricatani. Thank you for listening.
This show is part of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MatTalkOnline.com.